Hi, welcome to the Aruba OS 8.3 how-to video series. This is going to be the 9th video in a 15 video series that covers the initial config and deployment of an Aruba OS 8.3 Mobility Master and controller config. Now, in the previous video, we established a controller cluster in Campus A, and to see what that looks like, we can basically click here and we can see the two clusters. What I wanted to do now was to show what it looks like to establish a cluster config in the command line. However, to do that, what I'm actually going to leverage is the Aruba Solutions Exchange. So this is ase.arubanetworks.com. Anyone can sign up to it, and then once you are signed in to this tool, you can basically go and look up a large number of solutions. And what these solutions really are just, there's the solutions themselves are very simple, easy to follow, kind of wizard-based script builders. So for example, if you wanted to configure Mobility Master redundancy, you could follow kind of the steps that are inside this recipe, and it gives you some explanation for what the different terminology is and what the architectures look like. But then once you're ready to start, you can basically just walk yourself through. There's a series of questions. You answer yes or no, and then based on those questions, it presents you the fields you need to fill in to generate the necessary configuration snippets to be pasted into the controller. So while this doesn't automate it from the GUI perspective, it certainly gives you kind of a scripted way to build new things that might be unfamiliar to you at the command line level, so you can see how the process works. Now, the other thing that they do have is on ASE, we also have recipes. Now, these recipes take a little bit of time to load because a recipe is a collection of a bunch of different solutions. So for example, if you wanted to walk through a recipe on deploying an Aruba OS 8 deployment, the recipe will have a collection of solutions that walk you through start to finish how to deploy your Mobility Master, how to deploy your controllers, how to connect your controllers to the Mobility Master, how to bring up APs, etc. So there's a number of different recipes that have been established here, and you can certainly walk through these. Again, there's no limitation to membership. Anyone that has an email address can sign up and get access. And then once you're in there, you can see the number of recipes. So for example, if you wanted to build an AOS 8 branch network, which is part of a lab that we do for training on our partners and employees, you can load up this specific recipe, and it will have a number of different solutions that are a part of that recipe. So it's a pretty handy tool to have for those that kind of want to learn how all this stuff works. So you can see, for example, the recipes that are applied to this, or sorry, the solutions that are applied to this recipe here. So if I come back to the solutions page, I want to look for the cluster solution. So I'm just going to search for cluster, and you can see here that it says clustering of mobility controllers, which is what I want to do. So I'm going to click on this, and it's going to give me some information, some terminology, things that I need to know, and how a cluster works. This is basically a snippet out of the user guide that kind of tells you what this feature is about. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and it's going to ask me a series of questions. And so, for example, it asks for the group level config path, which from the GUI is this Campus B. So I've got MD/Campus B, and I want to name the cluster Campus B cluster. And then the controller model is VMC. This becomes relevant later on in a few future settings. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Now it's going to ask for what type of cluster information do I want to set. So first, do I want to create a cluster VIP? And I do. I actually want to create a cluster VIP. And so in this case, it gives me the VRRP ID. I'm going to go ahead and use 60. Remember, this is, in this architecture, we're talking about configuring these two controllers in a cluster. And so I'm establishing the cluster VIP here, which is .60. And this will be used by every controller in the cluster. And so I've assigned this 150.60, which is what I have here. Then I have the VRRP VLAN. It asks if I want to use VRRP authentication, which I do, and so I enter the VRRP passphrase. And then I also want to configure the COA VRRP per controller, absolutely. So then I'll hit next, and now it asks for cluster member information. Now, where I get this from, if you're going to be working from the command line, you might as well kind of figure out where this comes from. But if I go back to the MM here and I do a show config node hierarchy, what it's asking for is the full path to these devices here. So this right here is VMC B1. This one above it is VMC B2. And so I have essentially copied that path for each relevant controller into this field. The IP address for VMCB1 is 150.61, and it asks here if I want to go ahead and exclude some VLANs, which I know I automatically want to exclude VLAN 1, which for most deployments you're going to end up having to exclude VLAN 1 unless you transport it on your network. It also asks for the cluster VRP priority for controller 1, which I set for 200, and the COA VIP, which from the drawing here I have assigned for this controller as 63. For the second cluster member, I'm basically taking VMCB2. I've got the IP address for it here. It asks me to exclude a VLAN, which I want to exclude VLAN 1. It asks for the cluster VRP priority, which actually I need to set this for 200. And then it asks for the COA VIP, which I've established in the network drawing over here as .64. If I had a third cluster member, I would enter it here. That would ask me for the similar bits of information, but I only have these two. So I'm going to go ahead and hit finish. Now what it's going to generate is a kind of an instruction sheet here that kind of shows you what it looks like in the GUI. It's also going to give you the actual config elements that we need to copy and paste into the Mobility Master. Now you can basically take everything for it says when you're configuring the device level config, you can basically start at the top and work your way down. So what I need to do is I need to copy all of this. Now if we look at this, what it's actually going to do is it's going to CD into Campus B group. It's going to create this LC cluster group profile called Campus B cluster, and then it's going to issue a write mem. So I'm going to go ahead, I'll start from scratch over here, and I'm just going to paste this in and hit enter. And so now I have this new Campus B cluster config that I want to put in. Now I'm going to close. I'm going to have to be in the command line for VMCB1 and VMCB2. So I'll go ahead and start with a fresh console here. And now I'm going to go back to my config, and it says you need to do your device level config, and so I'm going to copy this for, and actually as I look at this, I actually only need this part here, because if we remember correctly, we actually established the VRP IP in the cluster before. So I'm just going to copy this part, and I need to put this in cluster member 1, which is, there we go, which is VMCB1 here. So I've got that pasted in. No, I don't. That did not work. Oh, I need to do a config T. There we go. That did not do it either. What am I doing wrong? Oh, I apologize. I'm doing this from the wrong place. Let's do this. So I need to paste it in here. There we go. Sorry about that. It just shows you another way to realize you're making a mistake. I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to paste this bit in. And now all I need to do is initiate the group level config. There we go. And I'm going to take this and paste it in here. What does that say? VRP IP cannot be the same as the controller IP. Where did I get that wrong? Where did I paste that in wrong? Oh, this should be 62. Whoops. Where did I get that wrong? So as I go back, let's see. I need to make this the COA VIP IP address 63. This is 62. That's what I did wrong. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this. Whoops, not the whole thing. I'm just going to take this, and I'm going to paste this in again. There we go. So I'm going to do a write mem. Now, from the command line, what I actually want to do to see if it's up is I want to do a show LC cluster group membership. And what this is going to tell me is what the status of the cluster is from the command line level. So this is just like what you see when you look in the GUI, except it's at the command line. You can see that everything's kind of being negotiated. So it's not completely done. Now it is. You can see that it is L2 connected. The last heartbeat was 86 microseconds ago. The round trip was 1.338 microseconds. So the connection's pretty good and pretty fast between those two devices. If I go back to the dashboard, and I'll go ahead and just do a quick refresh, I should actually see both cluster members in there now, which I'm not seeing it yet. So I'll give it a little bit more time to populate into the Mobility Master. But eventually we'll see the other 150.61 and 150.62 cluster members show up under the Mobility Master, and then once that's done, everything will be complete. For the next video series, what we're actually going to do is start setting up access points, and so I want to go over it one more time. When we establish AP discovery using DHCP or DNS, we want to make sure that we point to the cluster VIP that we're going to use for AP discovery, and that just ensures that one controller in the cluster, as long as that cluster is up, will always be broadcasting that IP address. So that's why we're going to see so many IP addresses in there. Still waiting for this. Oh, there we go. Now it showed up. So if I choose campus B from the top up here, now I can see the other campus. So if you have any questions, certainly reach out online at some of the online help resources like community.arubanetworks.com, or you can reach out to your local Aruba SE or partner. Thank you.